Sometimes God will call a woman to walk a road that looks lonely to the outside world, but in heaven's eyes, it's a road marked with purpose. See, culture will tell you that your value is measured by who's holding your hand, who's calling you late at night, or who's posting you on their Instagram. But when God has chosen a woman, he doesn't need her to be validated by a boyfriend, a relationship, or an applause. He will sit her down in the silence, strip away the noise, and let her discover the kind of strength that is not dependent on anybody's presence, but completely rooted in his spirit. This sermon is for the woman who lives alone, who sometimes cries in the quiet, but who God has not forgotten. You are not overlooked. You are in training. Her singleness is not punishment, it's preparation. One of the greatest lies the enemy whispers to a woman's heart is that her singleness means something is wrong with her, that her waiting is proof that she's unloved, unwanted, or unworthy. But the truth is, when God sets a woman apart in this way, it's not rejection, it's divine strategy. He knows her purpose is too weighty to be distracted by a counterfeit. He knows her destiny cannot be entangled with people who don't have the capacity to carry it. So rather than allowing her to waste years attaching herself to someone who cannot handle her anointing, God preserves her in the hidden place. Think about Esther before she ever became queen. She was set apart, trained, and refined before she was introduced to the palace. She wasn't overlooked, she was being groomed. The same way a jeweler doesn't rush the process of polishing a diamond, God will not rush the process of developing his daughters. He knows that her singleness is not a sentence, it's the very environment where she learns how to steward her strength. In the quietness of her home, when there's no boyfriend to lean on, she learns how to lean on God in a deeper way. When she's left to carry the weight of her emotions alone, she realizes she's not truly alone because the Comforter is present. When nobody calls her beautiful at night, she hears heaven whisper that she is fearfully and wonderfully made. When she has to make decisions without a man's covering, she learns the authority of walking under God's covering. Singleness is where God strips away the false identities that come with being attached to someone else. Many women discover themselves only in relation to a man who they are as his girlfriend, his support system, his other half. But a woman who has been chosen to walk a season of solitude is forced to find her whole without needing a half. She learns who she is outside of titles and attachments, and that knowledge becomes the foundation for her calling. This season also trains her to be content, not complacent. Contentment is a holy posture that says, I may not have what I desire yet, but I will not despise what God has given me now. That posture shifts her perspective. Instead of waking up bitter about what she doesn't have, she wakes up grateful for what she does. Instead of scrolling through social media comparing her life to women in relationships, she invests in the growth of her mind, the healing of her heart, and the building of her vision. She stops waiting for someone to choose her and realizes she's already chosen by God. Preparation also means pruning. God allows the silence of singleness to surface the things that need healing. Old wounds, insecurities, fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, all of it rises up when there's nobody else to distract her. But instead of letting it destroy her, God uses it to deliver her. He says, let me be the one to hold the broken pieces. Let me be the one to show you that you are enough. So while she thinks this singleness is punishment, heaven sees it as surgery. God is taking out the infection of her past so that when he presents her future, she will be whole enough to receive it. And if you really think about it, preparation is a privilege. God doesn't prepare what he doesn't plan to use. If he has you in a season of singleness, it's because he intends to do something through you that requires focus, discipline, and clarity. He doesn't want you entering into your next chapter half developed. He wants you ready. There's something powerful about solitude that most people run from. We live in a culture where silence feels uncomfortable and being alone feels like rejection. But in God's kingdom, solitude is not isolation, it's revelation. When a woman is pulled into a season where she lives alone, where there's no boyfriend distracting her heart, no constant conversation filling her mind, God begins to use that space to turn up the volume of his own voice. See, God doesn't compete with noise. He doesn't force his way into conversations already crowded with opinions, gossip, or insecurities. He whispers, he nudges, he speaks in ways that require sensitivity. And sometimes the only way a woman can become sensitive to that frequency is if everything else is stripped away. That's why he will allow her to live without certain attachments, not to punish her, but to prepare her ears to hear him clearly. Think about Moses. Before he ever led Israel out of Egypt, he had to spend 40 years in the wilderness tending sheep. To people watching, that probably looked like failure, like he went from being a prince in Pharaoh's palace to being forgotten in the desert. But what looked like loneliness was actually the environment where God would reveal his voice through the burning bush. Moses couldn't have heard God in Pharaoh's palace with all the noise of Egypt surrounding him. He had to be in solitude. And it's the same with the woman God is setting apart. Her solitude is her wilderness, and it's in that wilderness where his voice becomes undeniable. There are prayers that only surface when no one else is around. There are tears she only releases when she knows nobody is watching. And in those moments, heaven leans in. God says, now that I have your full attention, let me show you who I am. That's why so many women discover their deepest callings, their strongest gifts, and their most unshakable faith in the seasons when they thought they were all alone. Living alone creates space for God to recalibrate her spirit. In the quiet, she learns how to recognize when he's speaking peace versus when her anxiety is speaking fear. She learns the difference between the enemy's accusations and God's affirmations. That discernment can't be learned when she's constantly surrounded by voices telling her what to do, how to live, or who she should be. It's cultivated in solitude. And here's the truth. When God's voice gets louder in her life, everything else gets smaller. The sting of loneliness lessens because she realizes she's not truly alone. The need for validation fades because she's hearing straight from the one who created her. The pressure to perform or compete disappears because God is reminding her daily, you are mine, you are enough. This season of solitude also teaches her obedience. When there's nobody else to lean on, she learns what it means to follow God's voice even when it doesn't make sense. She learns to trust the still, small whisper that tells her to apply for the job, write the book, start the business, serve in the ministry, or simply rest. Without distractions, she's more likely to obey quickly, and that obedience becomes the foundation for the blessings God wants to release in her life. So while the world may look at her and say, she's just alone, heaven looks at her and says, she's in training. Solitude is not empty space, it's sacred space. It's where the noise of the world dies down and the voice of God rises up. It's where she learns that she doesn't need constant companionship to be whole. She needs constant communion with her Creator. There's a certain kind of strength that is only born in solitude. When a woman lives alone without the daily comfort of a partner's presence or the reassurance of someone else holding her hand, she's placed in an environment where she either breaks or she builds. And the God who called her into this season has no intention of letting her break. He's teaching her how to build. That's why living alone isn't weakness, it's weight training. Every day she shows up, every day she chooses to stand, every day she keeps moving forward despite the silence. She is developing resilience that no relationship could ever substitute. See, emotional resilience is the ability to bend but not break, to cry but still get up, to feel the weight of disappointment and still choose faith. When a woman learns this while she's alone, she's unstoppable when she's connected. Because her strength won't be borrowed from anyone else, it will be rooted in her. She knows how to manage her emotions without dumping them on someone else. She knows how to sit with her pain and let God comfort her instead of always reaching for human validation. She knows how to walk through the fire without expecting somebody else to rescue her because she's already seen God keep her in the flames. And then there's spiritual resilience. Living alone pushes her into deeper communion with God, not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. When there's no one else to talk to at the end of the day, she talks to Him. When the silence feels heavy, she fills it with prayer and worship. When the battles in her mind rage at midnight, she learns how to fight them with scripture instead of distractions. That kind of intimacy with God doesn't happen when life is crowded. It happens when life is stripped down, when she has no choice but to lean on the unseen more than the seen. Think about David before he was king. He was alone in the fields, tending sheep, fighting lions and bears when no one was watching. That solitude created the resilience he would later need to face Goliath. If he hadn't learned how to conquer in private, he would have never had the courage to conquer in public. In the same way, the woman who lives alone is facing her lions and bears right now, her fears, her insecurities, her doubts, her loneliness. But as she learns to overcome them with God's help, she's building the kind of spiritual muscle that will slay giants later. Resilience doesn't mean she doesn't feel the ache of being alone. It doesn't mean she doesn't sometimes wish she had a partner to share life with. It means that even in the ache, she refuses to let the ache define her. It means she acknowledges the pain but doesn't let it paralyze her. It means she can cry on Sunday night and still show up strong Monday morning. That balance, that tension between vulnerability and victory is what makes her resilient. Living alone also forces her to face herself. When there's no one else to hide behind, she comes face to face with her flaws, her habits, her thought patterns. That can be uncomfortable, but it's also transformative. Because resilience isn't just about surviving storms, it's about being refined by them. Each day alone is like a refining fire, burning away what doesn't belong and revealing the gold that does. So while outsiders may think she's fragile because she's alone, the truth is the opposite. She's becoming fortified. She's learning how to walk by faith and not by sight. She's developing a kind of resilience that can withstand heartbreak, disappointment, and delay without losing hope. She's not just surviving her solitude, she's being strengthened by it. One of the hardest things for a woman to do is to sit with herself and truly discover who she is outside of what people expect her to be. Most of us are shaped by noise, the voices of family telling us who we should become, the influence of culture telling us what beauty looks like, and the pressure of relationships telling us how to act to be loved. But when God allows a woman to live alone, without a boyfriend, without constant companionship, He's creating a sacred space where all the noise dies down. And in that silence, she begins to discover her identity in its purest form. Distractions are powerful because they keep us busy but not whole. They make us feel occupied but not fulfilled. When a woman has constant attention from others, she can easily confuse that attention for identity. She can think, I'm worthy because he calls me beautiful, or I'm valuable because someone wants me. But when those voices are no longer there, when there's nobody affirming her daily, she is pushed to ask a deeper question: who am I when no one is watching? Who am I when no one is validating me? Who am I when it's just me and God? That's when God begins to peel back the layers. He shows her that her worth is not tied to her relationship status, but to her creation status. She is valuable because she was formed in His image. She is beautiful because He designed her with intention. She is chosen because before the foundation of the world, He called her by name. And none of those truths require a boyfriend's approval or the world's applause. This season becomes a mirror. Living alone forces her to confront not only her strengths but also her weaknesses. She sees where she's been hiding behind relationships to cover insecurities. She notices the habits she developed to keep herself from facing pain. And as those things rise to the surface, God doesn't condemn her. He heals her. He teaches her that identity isn't about perfection, it's about authenticity. It's not about being who people want her to be, but about becoming who He created her to be. Think about Jesus in the wilderness. Before He performed miracles, before He preached to crowds, He was led by the Spirit into a place of solitude. And in that wilderness, the enemy tempted Him by questioning His identity. If you are the Son of God, but Jesus didn't waver. He knew who He was before the miracles, before the followers, before the public recognition. His identity wasn't rooted in performance, it was rooted in His Father. In the same way, the woman who lives alone is being trained to know who she is before she ever steps into partnership, leadership, or visibility. Without distraction, she begins to hear her own thoughts clearly. She learns to separate her true desires from society's expectations. Maybe she realizes she doesn't even want the kind of relationship the world told her she should crave. Maybe she discovers gifts and passions that were hidden beneath her need for approval. Maybe she recognizes that her purpose is bigger than simply being someone's partner. It's about changing environments, building visions, breaking generational cycles. And here's the thing, once a woman knows her true identity, she becomes unshakable. She no longer crumbles when someone doesn't choose her because she already knows she's chosen by God. She no longer bends to fit into spaces that diminish her because she knows her value. She no longer seeks validation in shallow places because she has discovered the depth of who she is in God. So this season of solitude isn't about lack. It's about discovery. It's not about what she doesn't have, but about what she's finally seeing in herself. Without distractions, she's learning that her identity is not fragile, it's foundational. And once she learns that, she can never go back to living small again. When a woman lives alone, the natural assumption is that she's just waiting to be loved, that her story is on pause until a partner enters the picture. But what if God's plan is much bigger than her being loved by one person? What if he's setting her apart, not because she's forgotten, but because he's preparing her to lead? There's a difference between being positioned for comfort and being positioned for calling. Many women are taught that their highest goals should be love, marriage, and companionship. And while those things are beautiful and God ordained, they are not the limit of her destiny. Some women are chosen to carry mantles that demand leadership, vision, and spiritual authority. To prepare them, God places them in seasons where they must depend solely on Him. Because leadership requires clarity, courage, and conviction that can't always be developed in the safety of partnership. It must be formed in the crucible of solitude. Think about Deborah in the book of Judges. She wasn't introduced as someone's wife first. She was introduced as a prophetess and a judge over Israel. Her role wasn't simply to be loved, it was to lead a nation into victory. That kind of anointing doesn't come from following the crowd, it comes from standing apart. The woman who lives alone today may not realize it, but her solitude is the same kind of training ground. God is stripping away distractions so that when He raises her voice, she won't hesitate to use it. Living alone teaches her how to make decisions with authority. She doesn't have someone else making choices for her, so she learns discernment. She doesn't lean on another person's leadership, so she practices leading herself. That kind of daily responsibility builds a backbone of strength. And when God calls her to influence others, whether in ministry, business, family, or community, she won't crumble under the weight of leadership because she's been carrying weight all along. And let's be clear, being positioned to lead doesn't mean she won't one day be loved. It simply means that love is not the end goal, purpose is. When love comes, it will be aligned with her assignment, not a replacement for it. That's the difference between being chosen by man and being chosen by God. A man may love her for how she fits into his life, but God positions her for how she will change lives. Living alone also allows her to refine her voice without compromise. Sometimes when a woman enters into relationships too soon, she dilutes her calling to fit the comfort of the person she's with. She shrinks back from leadership because she doesn't want to intimidate. She hides her vision because she doesn't want to seem too much. But a season of solitude eliminates that pressure. She's free to grow, free to expand, free to discover the fullness of her leadership without apologizing for it. This positioning is about preparation for impact. God knows that her influence will extend beyond herself, so He allows her to taste the weight of responsibility now. She's learning how to handle finances, how to protect her peace, how to guard her spirit, how to walk with integrity. These are not small lessons, they are leadership lessons. And when the time comes, she will not only be ready to lead her own life, but also to guide, inspire, and transform others. So while the world may pity her solitude, heaven is applauding her preparation. She's not just waiting. She's not overlooked. She is being positioned, and the position God is preparing for her is not one of dependence, but of dominion. She is being shaped into a woman who will not just receive love, but release leadership. What a woman does in private will always echo in public. When God allows a woman to live alone without a boyfriend, without a constant human witness to her life, it can feel like her efforts are unseen. She cooks for one, she prays in the quiet, she makes sacrifices nobody applauds. She wipes her own tears and still shows up to work, still shows up to church, still shows up to life. And while it looks like nobody notices, heaven is watching. God is shaping her through private discipline, because the discipline she cultivates in solitude will one day become the testimony that inspires many. See, it's easy to show up strong when you have an audience. It's easy to be consistent when someone else is keeping you accountable. But the real test of character is what you do when no one is looking. And the woman who learns to be faithful in the unseen seasons, faithful with her finances, faithful with her body, faithful with her time, faithful with her spirit, is building the kind of testimony that cannot be faked when the lights turn on. Private discipline looks like choosing prayer over panic. It looks like turning to the word instead of the world when anxiety rises. It looks like saying no to toxic cycles, even when temptation is calling her phone. It looks like budgeting her money when no one else knows she's doing it. It looks like fasting quietly when she feels spiritually dry. These small hidden choices may never make a highlight reel, but they are the bricks that God is using to build her future. Think about Daniel. Long before he was thrown into the lion's den, he had a private discipline of prayer 3 times a day. That discipline wasn't flashy, it wasn't public, but it became the very testimony that glorified God when he stood before kings. The same is true for this woman. Her consistency in the quiet is preparing her for influence in the open. And here's the beauty: her testimony won't just be about what God did for her, but about who she became with him. People will see her strength, but they won't know it was forged in lonely nights of worship. They'll admire her peace, but they won't realize it was born in seasons of tears where she chose trust instead of bitterness. They'll celebrate her breakthroughs, but they won't see the countless times she sowed seeds of obedience when nobody was clapping. That's why her testimony will carry weight. It's not performance, it's authenticity. Living alone also removes excuses. She can't point to anyone else as the reason she didn't grow, didn't pray, didn't dream. She learns accountability to God and to herself, and that accountability births maturity. She stops waiting for someone else to cover her spiritually and realizes she has the power to cover herself in prayer. She stops waiting for someone else to push her forward and realizes discipline is her responsibility. This shift from dependence to discipline is what sets her apart as a leader and a vessel of influence. And eventually, God will bring her into spaces where her private disciplines will shine publicly. Her ability to remain calm under pressure will inspire others who are drowning in chaos. Her financial stewardship will open doors to bless others. Her purity and integrity will stand out in a culture that compromises. Her devotion will draw others to God, not because she preached perfection, but because she lived consistency. So while others may pity her for living alone, heaven is proud of her for living disciplined. Because when the spotlight comes, she won't be exposed as someone unprepared. She'll be revealed as someone who was forged in the quiet. And her testimony will not just be about survival, it will be about stewardship. It will say, even when no one was watching, I chose God. And because I chose him, he is now choosing to use me.